Well, you get a read on how the night's going and what an audience is like.
Well, when the guitars are out of tune, yeah, what do you do? What do you do?
Now, Brer Rabbit had a good friend. His name was Sandy Raccoon. And Sandy got to be called Sandy by spending all of his time down by the creek. Down along those sandy creek banks is where he could catch himself a whole bunch of frogs. And frogs is what raccoons like to eat best. But as Sandy got older, he started to get slower and stiffer, and he couldn't jump for those frogs the way that he used to. So the frogs, they just get away. Well, after a long time of him not bringing home any more frogs to eat, Mrs. Sandy Raccoon lost her temper. She gave him the bawling out of his mortal life up one side and down the other. She sent him packing, saying, either you bring me home some more frogs to eat, or you don't bother coming back here at all. Poor old Sandy. He was going down the road feeling about as sad as an old worn-out pair of shoes when who should come along but his good friend, Brer Rabbit. Brer Rabbit says, what are you looking so down in the mouth about? So Sandy told him the whole story. Brer Rabbit said, that don't sound like nothing much at all. I've got a plan that'll catch you and your wife more frogs than you could possibly eat.
Well, Sandy wanted to hear a plan like that. Brer Rabbit said, here's what you do. You walk on down by the creek bank, down where you'd normally hang out. And after a while, you start talking out loud about how hot it is outside today and how bad your head hurts and how upset your stomach is. Then you start to sway back, forward, and back, forward, and back, forward, like you was real dizzy. And then you just fall flat down in the sand. Don't you move a muscle. Don't you let your leg flick. Don't you let your tail twitch. Don't you blink an eye until I tell you to move. Now, Sandy couldn't figure out how doing that was going to catch him any frogs. But he figured that his best bet was to do exactly as Brer Rabbit said. He walked down by the creek bank, down along the sandy banks. And after a while, he started talking out loud about how hot it was outside today and how bad his head hurt. How upset his stomach was, how he didn't feel any better than a dime's worth of dog meat. Then he started to sway back and forth, back and forth, and back and forth, like he was real dizzy, and then he just fell down in the sand. He laid there, he didn't move a muscle, he didn't let his leg flick, he didn't let his tail twitch, he didn't blink an eye.
He lay there a long time. It got to be like 1 o'clock in the afternoon. 1:30, 2 o'clock, it was hot, and that water was only a few feet away. Still, he didn't move. 2:30, 3 o'clock, 3:30, mosquito came and landed on his nose. Flew off, brought back some friends. He still didn't move. 4 o'clock, 4:30, 4:57. Sandy was feeling like a real fool lying there, when all of a sudden he hears, he feels a snaky lick on his toe. So Grandmother Water Moccasin coming on up to see what's going on. Sandy hated snakes. He could hear her scrunching in the sand, heading right up by his ear. He was just about to let out a scream when she was gone, and not 5 seconds later, he hears somebody come whistling and singing down the road in the distance. He recognizes Brer Rabbit's voice, and Brer Rabbit gets closer and closer and closer, and all of a sudden Brer Rabbit starts screaming and hollering out loud, saying, poor old Sandy's dead. Poor old Sandy's gonna die today for sure. And all along the creek bank, all the little frog heads start popping up saying, is he dead? Is he dead? Is he dead? Is he dead? Of course he's dead, said Brer Rabbit. You don't see him moving, do you? On a hot day like today, where are we going to find someone big enough that we can dig a hole deep enough to bury Brother Sandy in? Well, those frogs, they felt like celebrating. They said, let's dig it.
Let us dig it, dig it, dig it. Let us dig it.
Well, I don't know, said Brer Rabbit. Do you think you can dig a hole that's deep enough? And those frogs said, oh, you can try.
We can try. We can try.
You know, when I told my folks that I was getting into folk music, I bet they never thought I was going to do this instead. So those frogs, they gathered all around Sandy, and they started digging. And the sand and gravel flew in every direction, and that hole with the Sandy and all the frogs in it started to sink lower
And lower.
and lower.
Now, pretty soon the frogs looked up out of the hole. Now, Brer Rabbit, he's standing on top of the dirt pile. He's kind of supervising the excavation. You know, frogs looked up out of the hole and they said, "Is it deep enough? Is it deep enough?" Brer Rabbit looked down in the hole and he said, "Well," he said, "I don't know." He said, "We wouldn't want anybody to come along in the night and dig old Brother Sandy up, now would we?" He said, "You better dig that out a little deeper." So the frogs, they went back to digging. The sand and the gravel was flying in every direction, and all the time that they were digging, Brother Sandy didn't move a muscle. He didn't let his leg flick. He didn't let his tail twitch. He didn't blink an eye in that hole with Brother Sandy and all those frogs, and it just kept on sinking lower.
And lower.
And lower.
Well, after a while, those frogs were getting really tired. They looked down up at Brer Rabbit and they said, "Well, I don't know," said Brer Rabbit. He walked down over to the hole and he dangled one paw over the edge. He said, "You know, can you jump that high?" And those frogs looked up and they said, "I think we can."
I think we can.
"Well," said Brer Rabbit. They didn't say that. "Well," said Brer Rabbit, "I think you have just about got it. Why don't you go dig it out a few more inches and you'll be done." So those frogs, they went back to digging until they were just lying there exhausted.
Then they looked up at Brer Rabbit again. Now, Brer Rabbit, he's standing on top of the dirt pile. He's kind of supervising the excavation. You know, frogs looked up at Brer Rabbit and they said, "Is it deep enough? Is it deep enough?" Brer Rabbit looked down in the hole and he said, "Well," you think you can jump out?" Well, the frogs looked up at the hole. The hole's pretty deep. The frogs looked up and they went, one of them went, and then the other one went, and then they went, and then they're laying down at the bottom going, "I don't think we can. I don't think we can. I don't think we can. I don't think we can." Brer Rabbit, he looked down in the hole and he said, "Well then, it's deep enough. Brother Sandy, now rise up and catch your frogs." And ladies and gentlemen, with all the frogs just trapped in the bottom of the hole, that's exactly what Brother Sandy went and did.